In this video, I will be making my first official prediction for the 2024 election between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, now that Harris is officially the presumptive Democratic nominee. So today, we'll see where both candidates stand in terms of winning the White House. We will begin by filling in the solid states for both candidates, states that either Harris or Trump are virtually guaranteed to win, and the margins in these states are likely to be at least 12%. For Kamala Harris, we have the states of Washington, Oregon, and her home state of California on the West Coast, as well as Hawaii. Even though the Biden administration's handling of the Maui fires was pretty terrible, Hawaii is simply too blue of a state to not be solid for Harris. It voted for Joe Biden by nearly 30 points 4 years ago. We also have Illinois, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Biden's home state of Delaware, Maryland, the District of Columbia, and the 1st District of Maine, giving the vice president 139 electoral votes. As for Trump, he's going to win nearly every single rural state in the middle of the country. Starting off, we have Alaska, as well as Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, all of Nebraska except the 2nd District, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, the 2nd District of Maine, as well as Iowa and Ohio. Ohio, of course, being the home state of his running mate J.D. Vance. Looking at Trump's margins in Iowa and Ohio in the last 2 elections, they were both likely in 2016 and 2020, but Trump flipped these states 8 years ago after they voted for Obama in 2012, and they've only been shifting to the right ever since. So in 2024, Trump is probably going to win them by at least 12 points. And so with all the solid states filled in, Trump leads with 149 electoral votes to Harris's 139. We're now going to move on to classifying the likely states. These states are going to be slightly more competitive. However, one candidate definitely does have an edge, and these states will be decided by margins between 5 to 12 percentage points. Starting off, we have the state of Texas, 40 electoral votes. The Lone Star State was only decided by a 5-point margin in 2020, down from Trump's 9-point victory 4 years prior. However, we're probably going to see Trump win by at least a double-digit margin this time around. It might even end up being solid Republican, and that would be the first time that Texas votes solid red since 2012. But as of right now, we're going to be a little bit more conservative here and just place Texas into the likely Republican category. Florida will also be likely red, and this is pretty dramatic. The last time that any candidate won Florida by more than 5% was George W. Bush, when Florida went to him by exactly that margin. Trump, though, is probably going to win Florida by closer to a double-digit margin. 7 to 10 points is where I would put the Sunshine State in 2024. It actually voted for Senator Marco Rubio and Ron DeSantis in the 2022 elections by 16 and 19 points. That is just how red the state has gotten in recent years, and so there's no doubt that Trump is going to win Florida for a 3rd time in a row. We also have the states of North Carolina and Georgia, 2 states that used to be pretty competitive. I mean, looking at the 2020 map, North Carolina went to Trump by 1%, Georgia, Biden actually won. However, polling in 2024 has been pretty bad for the Democrats. Joe Biden was on track to losing both of these states by 5 to 7 points, and the polling right now shows basically the same thing for Kamala Harris. These states can definitely get closer, and I wouldn't be surprised if I move them into the lean range in the future, but for right now, they start off as likely for Trump, with Kamala Harris as the new Democratic nominee. Before we continue, only 10% of you guys are actually subscribed, so please take the time to subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election in November, and follow me on Twitter for daily political updates, link in the description below. And now we're going to fill in the likely states for the vice president. 2 of them are pretty obvious. We, of course, have New York and New Jersey. Of course, in New York, Kathy Hochul has been a pretty unpopular governor. She almost lost her re-election and went within a 10-point margin between her and Republican Lee Zeldin. New York is a state that voted for Joe Biden by 23%. in the last election, but when Biden exited the race, he was only leading on average by 7.5% in the Empire State, and that was an average that was compiled from nearly 10 polls. So it's not just some polls that were bad for Biden. Basically, every single poll released in 2024 so far had Biden leading by a single-digit margin. New York is no longer the solid blue state that it once was. Democrats are doing pretty terribly in New Jersey as well. Bob Menendez is still a sitting senator, even though he's been convicted of multiple charges of bribery. The Senate race to replace him is competitive. Republicans are doing a lot better than they typically would because of Menendez, and that's going to impact Kamala Harris on the presidential level as well. And the final likely state on this map is Colorado. 10 electoral votes. I imagine the margin to be somewhere around 5 to 8 points. Joe Biden actually did really well in the state, winning it by 14%. It's definitely bluer than it was a decade ago. Hillary Clinton only carried Colorado by 4.9%. So I think Harris is probably going to do a little bit better than that, but the margin is not going to be anywhere near Biden's solid margin from 4 years ago. And so with the solid and likely states filled in, Trump leads 251 to 191. We're now going to fill in the lean states on this map, states that will be decided by margins between 1 and 5%. They're going to be competitive, but one candidate will still maintain a slight edge. And so for Harris, we're going to begin with New Mexico. Hispanic voters are continuing to shift away from the Democratic Party, and New Mexico is the only state in the country with a Hispanic majority. Democrats are going to have to work for a victory here this time around, even though Biden barely visited New Mexico, and he still won the state by nearly 11 points. Kamala Harris is not going to be that lucky. She is going to have to work for the votes of New Mexicans. We also have the state of Maine, the at-large vote with 2 electoral votes. Maine is a state that's basically never talked about in presidential politics. It doesn't really have too much weight electorally, and honestly, Democrats almost always win the state. The last time a Republican won Maine was all the way back in 1988. However, Donald Trump did come close to flipping the state in 2016, losing by just 2.9%. We're probably going to see something like this happen again in 2024, even though Biden carried Maine by a nearly double-digit margin. We're seeing a lot of states shift to the right from where they were 4 years ago, and Maine is no exception. Donald Trump actually leads by 6% in the most recent poll from the state. That poll is likely wrong. However, there's no doubt that Maine is going to be a lot more competitive than it was last time. And the final lean state for Kamala Harris is the state of Virginia, 13 electoral votes. Yes, there was a lot of talk that Trump could actually win the state, and I think that's still definitely possible. A lean rating definitely means that it's in play. But with Joe Biden out of the race and with just as many issues basically being gone for Democrats, Kamala Harris is probably going to do a little bit better in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I would expect a margin around 2 to 4%. The state did elect a Republican governor in 2021, but Glenn Youngkin was a pretty strong candidate against Terry McAuliffe, the Democrat, who ran a really poor campaign. Trump can still win Virginia, but right now it would be a more accurate rating to put it as lean Democrat. We're now going to move on to the lean states for Trump, starting off with the 2nd District of Nebraska. Biden won it in 2020, but Trump is on track to winning it back. We also have the states of Nevada and Arizona, 2 states that were also won by Biden in the last election. Nevada by 2.4%, Arizona by 0.3%. In fact, no Republican has won Nevada since 2004. Hillary Clinton defeated Trump in the Silver State by 2.4% 8 years ago. However, basically every single poll, if you've been following for the 2024 cycle, had Joe Biden losing Arizona and Nevada by 5, 6, 7 points with Kamala Harris in the race. She is not going to win these states, but we're going to just have to wait and see what happens, what the new polls tell us. But for right now, Donald Trump is still on track to easily flip Nevada and win back Arizona. We also have 3 lean states in the Midwest. I think it's pretty obvious which ones those are going to be: Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. All 3 states that Kamala Harris must win if she wants to get to 270 electoral votes, but we're seeing Trump doing very well in the polling in all 3 of these states. He also won these 3 states in 2016 all by margins less than 1%. However, a victory is a victory, and Trump right now is performing much better in these 3 states than he was in 2016. So Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, 2 key states for Democrats, states that have won Democrats' elections for decades, going from the 1990s all the way until 2016. They are now red states. Donald Trump is on track to win the entire, what was supposedly called the blue wall. And so essentially the election is over if Trump can win any one out of these 3 states. There's no other way for Harris to get 270 electoral votes in any reasonable manner. If she can't win even just one out of Wisconsin, Michigan, or Pennsylvania, she can't win Nevada, she can't win Arizona, she can't win Georgia. All of these states are currently more Republican. So the fact that Trump is expected to win by lean margins in all 3 of the former blue wall states is pretty devastating to the Democrats' efforts to win the White House for a second time in a row. We are now left with just 2 states, Minnesota and New Hampshire, 2 states that weren't actually that close in 2020. Joe Biden won both of them by 7 points. However, this election cycle, they are going to be among the most competitive. I have Minnesota in the tilt Republican category. Donald Trump is on track to being the first Republican to win the state since 1972, a 52-year record. And so looking at what we saw in 2016, Hillary Clinton came very close to losing Minnesota. It's a state that generally has been shifting to the right along with the rest of the Rust Belt. I mean, just look at where the Midwest was in 2012. Everything was blue except for Indiana. Then in 2016, everything was red except for Illinois and Minnesota, which Clinton barely won. We also have New Hampshire, which can get competitive. Hillary Clinton won the state by 0.4%, but honestly, Trump isn't the best candidate in the Granite State. He did not win the New Hampshire primary in 2016, and Nikki Haley did much better in New Hampshire in the primary in 2024 than she did in many other states. So there is a little bit of a lack of support for Trump among even his own party in New Hampshire. So for right now, I'm going to give Harris a very slight edge and place New Hampshire into the tilt Democratic category. And so this is my first ever prediction for the 2024 election between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. 323 electoral votes for the former president to 215 for the vice president. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election in November. And join my Discord server, link in the description below.